Are you interested in protecting your future self with data under your belt? Then this episode is for you. It's actually been inspired by one of my Instagram reels that really struck a chord. It's my first viral reel on Instagram, and it's now reaching about 3 million views. And in it, I said, well, I'm a gerontologist and I study aging, and here are 6 tests you need to get in midlife before it's too late. And so now we're going to go a little bit deeper because understanding why these tests matter, and we're actually going to dive a little bit deeper, more than just the 6 tests. Well, that could actually change the trajectory of your health span, which is the number of years you live free of disease, right? And full of vitality, not just your lifespan. So in midlife, it's important to get these tests and know where your numbers are, because we can do a lot for prevention. That midlife is the sweet spot for prevention. So think about it. When somebody has Alzheimer's disease, it doesn't happen overnight. It begins silently in the brain up to 18 years before the symptoms actually appear. So this means that the groundwork that we need to do for cognitive decline can be laid out decades before any noticeable signs. And there's another interesting study that looked at the hearts of 94 American male combat casualties from the Korean War. And they had about an average of 20 years old, and they found a very high prevalence of coronary atherosclerosis. And this means just that there's plaque buildup in the arteries. And that can start at a really young age, long before you got a heart attack, right? So this is why I'm really passionate about prevention and early detection. And you'll just get why I'm even recording this episode. I cannot explain all of this in a 60-second reel. So grab your tea, get your notebook, pen and paper, and let's dive in. So I'm going to rattle off the 6 tests, but I talk a lot about, I bring a lot more here. So there is a lab test guide at the end of this, well, at the end of this podcast, in the show notes, that you can just download and have it. So in case you're driving and can't get a pen, like, don't worry, just go to the show notes. So the first one is a DEXA scan or a REM scan. Okay. We just, whatever it is to scan your bones, to screen your bones, you got to know what's happening in there. And this is important because bone health is often a silent issue until it becomes silent no more. We're talking about osteopenia and osteoporosis. This can develop without symptoms until a fracture happens. And by then it's just too late. So that's why they call it a silent killer. In any case you're not aware of what is the difference between osteoporosis and osteopenia, osteoporosis is a condition where the bones become weak and brittle due to loss of the density and the strength. And this increases the risk of fractures, even when you just have a little fall or just some small stressors. And osteopenia is the precursor to osteoporosis. So it's kind of like pre-diabetes and then diabetes. And this is where the bone density is just lower than the normal, but not low enough to be classified as osteoporosis. So why does this matter in midlife? Well, because bone loss accelerates during perimenopause and postmenopause because of the loss of our sex hormones. These all play a huge role in bone remodeling. And if we wait until our 60s or 70s to check in, then it's really darn hard to reverse the damage. And if you have strong bones, you remain independent. Most older adults say they want independence. They don't want to be in a nursing home. They don't want to have people caring for them. They want to live and age in place. So falls and fractures are the leading cause of decline in older adults. And you probably already heard these stats somewhere else, but I'm going to repeat them again, that up to 30% of adults over the age of 65, because a lot of people don't make that point of 65. So we have this fear that's going to happen when we're 50, but up to 30% of the people who are over 65 who suffer a hip fracture die within 1 year due to complications. There's infections in the hospital. They're totally immobile. Believe me, I know what that does to your health. Been there. And worsening health conditions. And this is from the CDC. So don't wait for screening. And just a bone scan can tell you if you're starting to lose bone before you actually break your hip or wrist or vertebrae. Just recently, a friend of mine who is 74, she just tripped over a little step, fractured her wrist, had to get a major surgery. She lives alone, and this just completely derailed her life. She couldn't cook, she couldn't clean, she couldn't drive, she couldn't go out. She had to call her daughter to leave her family, fly in and take care of her from out of town. Luckily, she had that option. Not everybody does, and she's okay. But my first question to her was, are you on hormone therapy? And of course, the answer is no. But I walk a lot. And so for some people, that may be enough. But for her, she unfortunately had to learn the hard way that just isn't. So bone health, it's not just about avoiding fractures. It's about maintaining your independence, your mobility, your quality of life. Because when bones are weak, even that little fall can lead to major injury and a really long time to recover. And then sometimes it's not always you fall and fracture. Sometimes there's a fracture and then you fall. So keep that in mind. So how are we going to test? Most people know about the DEXA scan, DEXA. It measures bone density, and it's just the standard test for osteoporosis. But the sad truth is that most insurance covers this only after the age of 65. And I did a great podcast with an osteoporosis expert, Dr. Doug Lucas, who's been treating patients to reverse osteoporosis for years. And he told me that 65 is simply too late. And most of his patients are women in their 50s with either osteopenia or osteoporosis. Crazy, huh? So the good news is that there is a lot we can do to reverse osteoporosis. And I'll have a link to that episode that I recorded with Dr. Doug Lucas in the show notes. So check that out. But I want to talk about a lesser known but really powerful alternative to DEXA. And it's called the REMS scan, REMS. And it's a cool scan. It not only looks at the bone density, but looks at bone strength. And it does it without radiation. But if you have to get a DEXA scan, if that's the only thing you got, go for it. I've got the radiation hack, and I can share that with the show in the show notes, and that will offset the damage. But I've got a whole episode on the REM scan. It's just there's too much time. I don't have enough time to talk about the whole thing now, but it's a scan that I learned from my new biohacking bestie, Gary Rhodes. And the technology is new, so it's not yet widely accepted and not yet easy to find. So this is the problem with the new things. And we have got cool technology, but not enough research done on it, not enough people using it. It's not accessible or it's too expensive. And, that's just the problem. But if you can get your hands on it, I think it's really cool. So it doesn't use radiation. And it feels like an ultrasound, and it takes just a few minutes. And again, the best thing is that it may show you that it also shows you the bone density. Cool. But if you have osteopenia, you may have very strong bones. Okay. And it's important to understand that if the bones are stiff and brittle, they're easy to break. And a bone that's strong and flexible won't likely fracture. Okay. There's no guarantees in life, but you want to put the odds in your favor. So this episode I did with Gary was brilliant. I highly recommend listening to it. I'll have a link to that episode in the show notes too. And in that episode, you're going to find out where to get a REM scan as well. So yeah, go and screen your bones, whether it's DEXA or REMS, just do it before it's too late. Now, the second one that's super interesting is getting a full lipid panel. Okay. That's your blood work for your heart health. Okay. And it's the one that I mentioned in the reel is not one that your doctor will automatically order. You're going to kind of have to ask for it. And that's apolipoprotein B. So for women, the stakes are higher when we go through menopause, because before menopause, our sex hormones, particularly estrogen, give us cardiovascular protection. But once estrogen declines, then women really catch up to the men in terms of the heart disease risk. And this is one of the reasons why heart disease becomes the leading cause of death for both men and women after menopause. Well, women after menopause, not the man. So in fact, what's interesting is the Women's Health Initiative, which is that huge study. I can't remember how many million or millions of women are in there, but it was one of the largest studies done for women's health. It was originally launched to investigate whether hormone replacement therapy could be protective for the heart. because they were getting a lot of interesting data from the patients who were taking it, and they seemed to be doing really well heart-wise. And so despite how the results were actually misinterpreted in that really huge study, and it was widely publicized, further analysis of this study actually revealed that hormone therapy does protect the heart from atherosclerotic buildup when started within the window of opportunity, and as long as estrogen is not taken orally, but transdermally. Okay, the research so far has shown a higher risk of blood clots for oral estrogen. And that doesn't mean that oral estrogen is really bad and you can't take it. It's an option. Still, I would say leave it as a last option, in last resort, but your doctor just needs to pay a little bit closer attention to your heart health if you are on oral estrogen. But again, why take oral if you can take transdermal? But some women don't. They feel better on oral. Again, that's your own discussion with your own doctor. So that's why most doctors today won't prescribe hormone therapy to women more than 10 years post menopause or over the age of 60. And it's those protective effects. They're really, really diminished outside of that window. And then starting too late may make more risk than benefit. So again, it doesn't mean you cannot take HRT if you're in this camp. It just needs to be given a certain way, usually low and slow, while monitoring your heart markers. So when I studied at the Institute of Bioidentical Medicine, Dr. David Rosensweet, who created the Menopause Method program, he was teaching his doctors that usually after 6 months, if all the biomarkers of the heart were good, the risk of a cardiovascular event in that population were really reduced. So we're talking about the woman who's over 60 and 10 years post-menopause, and she wants to get on hormone therapy. You can. You just need to be done a little differently and monitored with a doctor who knows what they're doing. Okay. So, yes, we're going to talk about total cholesterol, LDL, and HDL. Total cholesterol, LDL, and HDL. This is what most doctors are looking at. That's not a full lipid panel. Okay. It's really important to look at that apolipoprotein B, or ApoB. It's a total game changer, and it's a better marker for your cardiovascular risk than just LDL alone. And then there's many others, which I'm going to share with you now. If you want to take a deeper dive, and if you're really concerned about your heart, so yeah, get the standard lipid panel, but ask your doctor to add these other tests if possible. These are not routine tests. This is not going to give you automatically. So you're going to have to probably fight for these or pay for them for yourself. So you also want to look at your triglycerides. And this is really important for understanding your fat metabolism. Your MPO, this is myeloperoxidase. And this is a marker of the inflammation in the arterial walls. Okay, again, low chronic grade inflammation is one of those hallmarks of disease, right? Or some people say that's the root cause of disease. So you want to lower inflammation. If there's any inflammation there, then you got to pay attention. Then there's oxy-LDL, or oxidized LDL, because this shows that oxidative damage in the LDL particles, which are contributing to the plaque formation. And then there's lipoprotein little a, and this is influenced by your genes, but it's also associated with an increased cardiovascular risk. And then there's the ApoB to ApoA1 ratio, and this shows a balance between the atherogenic and the protective lipoproteins. So you want it to be in this optimal range. And the next one is plaque, PLAC. It's also called LP-PLA2. And this helps assess inflammation in the artery walls. So this again gives you an insight into your plaque risk. It's kind of like the other one that I mentioned, the oxy-LDL, but it's just, again, another great way to look at the inflammation. And then, of course, your blood pressure, that kind of goes without saying. It's a little obvious. And then homocysteine is another cool one to look at for heart health, because when they're high, it's linked to cardiovascular and cognitive disease. So we want to always have your homocysteine in a great range. And then visceral fat. This is kind of a no-brainer as well. You can see this through body scans, and this is a real risk factor for cardio. It's a cardiometabolic risk factor. And then HSCRP. This is high sensitivity C-reactive protein. And this is another inflammatory marker. That's great to look at. Triglyceride to glucose ratio that gives us more insight into insulin resistance and metabolic risk. And then the last two are LDL particle quality. So this is the small, dense LDL. It's more dangerous than the large, fluffy, buoyant LDLs. And then the NT-proBNP. This is a marker of heart strain. And it's really useful for assessing your heart failure risk. Again, these are just like advanced testing only for those of you who maybe your basic panel is showing some risk. You've got a family history of heart disease. Maybe you kind of know you're a smoker, you're overweight, and you should be really concerned. So you can take a deeper dive into that. And then there's two other assessment tools that I think are pretty cool that was given to me. So all of these testing that I'm rattling off here has been given to me by the Boulder Longevity Institute. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know what a huge fan I am of that place, and as well as Dr. Elizabeth Yurth. She's just so brilliant in the regenerative medicine. And I would highly recommend you go to her website, the Boulder Longevity Institute, I think .com, can't remember. Just Google it. You'll find it. I'll have it on the show link, the show notes. And she's got great videos and trainings on how to read blood tests and great live Q&As and all that. So I'm not just pulling this stuff out of a hat. Comes back from a lot of the over 250 interviews I've done with some of these experts, as well as my own training in gerontology. So I think this is really, really useful. And again, I've rattled off a lot of testing, and I have this in a lab test guide in the show notes. The two other tools that are recommended are the Clearly scan, and this uses AI to look at the coronary the heart risk factors, as well as plaque buildup and all that. It's just, again, a new thing, crazy expensive, if I remember. Not accessible. Again, just keep it in mind. Hopefully prices will come down. Maybe insurance eventually will cover it. But these are just, again, more advanced tools. Another scan that you can try is the calcium score CT scan. It shows the calcified plaque in the arteries and helps, again, look at your cardiovascular risk. I have heard from other guests on my podcast who say that it's not a great tool because you can have a score of 0, which is great, like you have very low risk, and still die of a heart attack or still have plaque buildup. Again, it's one of those things, dive a little deeper into it before you spend your money on it. If insurance covers it, well, maybe it's okay to get it. So anyways, ask your doctor which of these might be right for you based on your age and your history and your goals and what you want. So these, again, you don't have to do all of these, but if you have access to them and want to, go for it. Now, the third lab test that I recommend is fasting insulin. Not fasting glucose. I mean, get the glucose, but it's not as an important marker as insulin because it's really important to understand where your insulin is. We become more insulin resistant during perimenopause and postmenopause because of the decline in our sex hormones like estrogen and progesterone. So these hormones, they are regulating our insulin sensitivity, meaning our body's ability to control our blood sugar. And without these hormones, the body becomes less efficient at managing that blood sugar. For example, a woman who's going through menopause, she's going to find that she's eating the same, exercising regularly, and she's still gaining weight, particularly around the belly. She may be feeling more tired after her meals. She's craving carbs more often. And these are just subtle signs of insulin resistance settling in. If you get your fasting glucose tested, it can be in that quote unquote normal range, but you can still be insulin resistant. So this is a classic example of a doctor. You may go in, oh, I'm concerned about my blood sugar. Let's, test fasting glucose. Doctor says everything's great. but you still feel lousy and you can't shift that menopause weight. Elevated insulin. If your insulin levels are too high, this has been linked to weight gain, fatigue, brain fog, and even increased risk of cancer and dementia. So some of these things like the brain fog and the weight gain, fatigue can be confused with menopause symptoms or thyroid issues, things like that. So it's, again, you got to be your own little investigator and try to figure things out for yourself. But fasting insulin just gives you this little sneak peek into your metabolic health way before diabetes even shows up, or prediabetes. And the earlier you detect it, the easier it is to turn it around with lifestyle changes and even hormone therapy just to top up those declining hormones. So think of this test as like an early warning system. And I have a fabulous episode coming up with health coach Jen Trippick from the podcast. She's got her own podcast called A Salad with a Side of Fries. She's really into the nutrition. And we covered everything you need to know about blood sugar and insulin resistance in menopause. It's coming up soon. So subscribe to the podcast and hit that little notification button. Number 4 is a thyroid panel, a full thyroid panel, not just TSH. So thyroid health is really important for your energy, for metabolism, brain function, your mood, temperature regulation, all of these things which can be totally disrupted in midlife and then just so often mistaken for perimenopause. Okay, that's why we did an episode called Thyropause with Dr. Amy Horniman, who has her own podcast called The Thyroid Fixer. She talked a lot about the body's just internal thermostat and when it's out of balance and how we can fix all these things when it's just thrown off. But most doctors are just going to run a TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone test. Okay. But the problem is that this doesn't tell the full story. At TSH, it signals your thyroid to go and make hormones, but it doesn't show if it's actually doing it. So it doesn't make any sense why you would just do TSH. So you also want to test your free T3, which is the active thyroid hormone that your cells actually are using. It's so important. And then the free T4, which is the storage form. And then that converts into T3. So those are like the major ones. Then there's reverse T3. It's a great add-on, and it's a blocking hormone that can interfere with the active T3. So you may go, oh, I've got free T3, but if reverse T3 is too high, then it's not really showing you that's what shows you a bigger story. So the problem is that I find not only with me in Europe, but other people around the world is the reverse T3 is a hard marker to get. It's not a standard. And I've run into plenty of labs who say, we just don't do that one. So good luck with that, but try to get it if you can. And if you want to go in even deeper, if you're suspecting you may have Hashimoto's, autoimmune disease, then you can do a TPO. This is thyroid peroxidase antibodies. And it can show if you have autoimmune conditions like Hashimoto's. Okay. If you have those antibodies, then that means, yeah, something's up. And then there's the TGAB, the thyroglobulin antibodies. It's just another antibody to diagnose Hashimoto's or Graves' disease. And then there's TBG, thyroid binding globulin. And this helps assess just abnormal hormone levels. And what it does is just measure some transport proteins and gives you an idea of if you have some sort of other more serious issues. And why is this important in midlife? Well, because thyroid issues can mimic perimenopause symptoms. Again, think about fatigue, weight gain, hair loss, brain fog. Those are the big ones when it comes to thyroid. It's like your metabolic thermostat is with your thyroid. It's if it's off, then everything else struggles, including your sex hormones. So don't just settle for a TSH. Advocate for that full panel. Get as much as you can get. So yeah, again, TSH doesn't tell the full story. Get free T3, free T4, reverse T3 at minimum. And I've got a great episode, with Dr. Amy Horniman in the show notes. So you can take a deeper dive into all things thyroid and menopause and this thing called Thyropause. But I also have another upcoming episode, which is not out yet, but coming very soon with Dr. Eric Osansky, who has a podcast called Save My Thyroid. So when everybody has a podcast dedicated just for that one thing, you know they're taking a deep dive into it. So check that out in the show notes. Number 5, sex hormones. Okay, I know this is super tricky, especially in perimenopause, but that doesn't mean they're not worth testing. I know a lot of doctors are like, poo-poo this, like, why? You're in perimenopause. It's just a snapshot in time. So it's true that sex hormones, when you're testing them in serum during perimenopause, it's goes wonky. Yeah, it is kind of a snapshot in time. And it's not necessary if you are considering HRT and you're having these symptoms, because you can test and they're likely going to be really low. Like, you can kind of take a guess, so save your money. But that being said, I really believe that it's really important to test your hormones at both serum and urine after starting hormone therapy, because you got to see if you're in that goalpost. So to protect your future self, again, if you just want to suppress symptoms, probably don't need it. You can go very low dose hormones and stop a hot flash, right? But if you are concerned about protecting your bones, your brain, your heart, vagina, your breast, your muscle, then you want to be in the optimal range or in a certain thing. And you probably need to be at higher levels to do that. So it can be tricky, but a good doctor will know exactly how to do this. They're going to tell you, this is the time to do your testing. Tell me exactly what hormones you're taking. When is it? The night before? Is it the morning of? Or whatever it is. They know what they're doing when they're a really good doctor and they understand how this works. It's not just, oh, I'll just test any day, and he or she doesn't ask, well, what hormones, what time did you take them before the test? Yeah, a good doctor will know how to interpret those results and all that. So I'm a fan personally of the testing the urine hormone metabolites, either through a Dutch test. It's a dried urine test of comprehensive hormones, not to see if you're related to somebody in Holland. It is a great test. Or there are some doctors that prefer the 24-hour urine test. I don't care. Do something, whatever it is, to look at the metabolites, because it's a test to show how your hormones are behaving, whether they're produced by your body, which is endogenous, or from hormone therapy, exogenous, you're putting it in. So we want to be sure that our estrogens, for example, are being metabolized down healthy pathways. And if they're not, well, then at least we know, and we can redirect them through some nutrition or supplementation, lifestyle interventions, stuff like that. So I have done several episodes on hormone testing. So check the show notes for deeper dives into this topic. But okay, let's talk about the hormones. What do we want to test generally? Because hormones is a big word. So we're going to test the estradiol, which is your primary estrogen, and it is the strongest one. And we want to know where that is. Estriol, it's a weaker form of estrogen, but it can be informative. Progesterone, it balances the estrogen and supports mood and sleep. Great to know where that is. Total testosterone. If you're looking at testosterone, actually, it's more than just total testosterone. That just shows you how much you got in circulation, but that doesn't mean anything if we can't use it, right? So that's why we do free and bioavailable testosterone, because it's the ones that's available to use. And very often with testosterone testing, doctors like to look at albumin, and it's a protein that binds hormones, and then it affects the availability, if we can use them or not. And then there's pregnenolone. It's a precursor to many hormones. Not all doctors choose to look at that, but some do. DHEAS, this is an androgen, and that declines with age. It's nice to know where that's at. SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin. This binds your sex hormones and regulates what's available. So if you have a low estrogen and a very high sex hormone binding globulin, then you could probably guess it's bound and just not bioavailable. So we need to know that. And then FSH, that's follicle stimulating hormone. It helps track your menopausal status, shows you if you're getting closer to menopause or not. But if you are on hormone therapy, it's a great marker to see if your levels are in an optimal range. We want it to be very, very low. Okay. Because meaning your body's going, oh, I'm getting the hormones that I need. I don't need to stimulate the body because it's getting what it needs. So if it's too high and you're taking hormones, kind of like, well, maybe your hot flushes are being suppressed, but you're not protecting the brain, for example. So you want to get into those optimal ranges for protection. Again, if you are concerned about your future self, not everybody is or cares. So you do you. So anyways, all of these hormones. Oh, and I forgot the luteinizing hormone. That's another, you can look at that if you'd like to look at some menopausal changes. But these markers are very comprehensive. They look at your hormone health. Really important if you are taking HRT, and help you assess the dosages as well. It's again, symptoms are really important. We need to look at symptoms. Everyone's different, and we can't just say this one size fits all prescription of HRT is going to suit everyone. So a good doctor will know how to ask you about your symptoms, assess you, and then look at your testing. Now, the last one is breast screening. I'm almost scared to talk about this one. In the reel, it was like 2 seconds because it's mammograms. It's a controversial topic and very confusing. Mammograms are the most widely available and they're covered by most insurance, just most accessible. But the concern that a lot of us have is the radiation. Radiologists say this is negligible, which it probably is, but it's targeted and uncomfortable, right? And that's where I question it. So I did this great episode I did many episodes actually on mammograms and breast screening. So I'm going to share that in the show notes and you can figure out what's best for you. But I personally think that we sometimes focus so much on the little things. And I'm not saying radiation is little. I'm just saying, what if it is? What if it really is negligible? And we're so worried about radiation and breast cancer risk when actually the place that we should really be focusing on are the big levers of driving breast cancer, which in my understanding is obesity, alcohol, and poor diet and lifestyle. But generally, it's those two things are modifiable risk factors for breast cancer. And I think we should really be a lot more focused on that. It's kind of like I'm worried about breast cancer risk and HRT. Again, it's like, okay, first of all, we know estrogen doesn't cause cancer, but if you were to say that, then it's negligible. Okay. Which again, this is everybody's by individual. I'm not saying you generally speaking, a healthy woman, the risk factor of obesity, smoking, alcohol is way higher than hormones, than radiation that you get from a mammogram. And this is in my opinion, but it doesn't mean let's forget it all. Let's lower the risk as much as we can. Let's not freak out. If that's the only thing you got, go for it. We have a radiation offset protocol, which was given to me by holistic oncologist, Dr. Jen Simmons. And if you want to get your hands on that, just go to the show notes. So get your mammogram if that's what you're going to do. Use the radiation protocol and you'll be fine. So again, mammograms super controversial. Some say it saves lives. Others say it doesn't. I found research supporting both sides. So what I will do is direct you to the podcast that I've done on mammography, on breast screening with both sides of the story. And then you can decide what's best for you. None of my business. So I personally, if you want to hear what I've done mammograms every year or every other year since my mom died of breast cancer when I was only 23. So I'm now 54 and I have had my fair share of radiation. It's amazing I'm even alive, right? And in addition to that, with the osteoarthritis that I've had an ACL tear when I was in my 20s. So I've always had knee issues. Like I've had dozens, probably more of x-rays and on my teeth, my gosh, my hips, my knees over the decades. I don't know. My game is just to try to lower the radiation exposure whenever it's possible, even if it's a small amount. Okay. So that's why this year I've decided to try the MRI with contrast. And now we have issues with the gadolinium, which is that contrast dye, but I have a hack for that too. So if you want that, I don't have it posted yet. So just send me an email if you want that one. And so this decision for me was made after I consulted with several doctors who, based on my history and my resources and things I can do, they suggested that route for now. So another tool that many women use for screening, not diagnostic, because there's a difference. Diagnostic is we've detected something, like now let's go take a deeper dive. And that's where mammograms are, and that's where maybe a biopsy or whatever it is that your doctor recommends to you. But I'm talking about just screening. If you're healthy, low risk, whatever, you've got an ultrasound. Okay. A lot of doctors I've talked to who about the breast screening, they like it. For certain women, they say it's non-invasive, it's radiation free, but it doesn't detect everything. So some women think, oh, that's a good thing because they want to avoid overdiagnosis and overtreatment. While other women say, well, that's a drawback because you might miss an early diagnosis and then a risk for needing way more invasive treatment later. Again, you decide what is best for you. And then there's the QT scan, and it's relatively new and controversial, just like the REMS and just like so many other things out there. It's something I'm interested in learning more about, but I don't have access to it in Europe. So it's just on the back burner for me for now, but you can listen to the episode I did with Dr. Jen Simmons all about it. And then, but what's really clear from all my interviews, both pro and against mammograms, is that thermography, self-examination, and then Oria tear testing are interesting add-ons. They're not replacements for either the mammography, MRI, or ultrasound, and definitely not the QT scan if you talk to Dr. Jen Simmons, which she believes is the gold standard. And you can forget all the rest. And maybe it is the best. I don't know. But you can imagine we don't cover this topic in gerontology. And when we do discuss it, it's mammograms all the way because that's what the information that they have. But we have more information. We can make decisions on our own. So I believe that just women need to do your own research. They need to speak with their own doctor to help them make informed decisions together, right? We're all bio-individual and we have different needs and approaches. So that's it. Those are the 6. Let's summarize. The 6 tests, again, I went way deeper than 6, but at least the 6 minimum that you should get in midlife before it's too late is the DEXA or the REM scan. Scan your bones, get a full lipid panel with that ApoB, fasting insulin, a complete thyroid panel that includes the TSH, free T3, free T4, and reverse T3. Then your sex hormones, usually progesterone, estrogens, testosterone, and then your breast screening, and get the radiation protocol if you go for a mammogram. So these aren't just diagnostic tools. They are preventative. They give you a baseline. They help you spot signs of imbalances, inflammation, something that's off. They put you in control. They put you in the driver's seat. Please grab that full list of labs. That's just way more than these 6 in the show notes. And if you loved this episode, please share it with a friend who's also navigating midlife. And if you haven't already, sign up for the Hack My Age newsletter at hackmyage.com just to stay up on the latest biohacks and hormone health tips, menopause research, great resources that I have. And thank you to everyone who has reviewed and rated this podcast. Your support really, really helps more women discover these life-changing conversations. And if you haven't left a review yet, would you take a moment, pretty please, to do that today? It would mean the world to me. I will see it and I will thank you for that. And don't forget, one last thing before I go is that I am on YouTube. If you're not watching this on YouTube already, head over to my channel to see the podcast in video format. And you're going to get a lot of bonus content that you may not hear anywhere else. And there's a really cool community of people there chatting away in the comment section. So anyways, thank you for hanging in there with me. Until next time, stay curious and stay strong and keep hacking your age.